So in this lesson, I want to quickly run through some more form types. So previously we had looked at the form and we saw that we had radio buttons, but we didn't really have a way to have a checkbox. So if someone was reading our terms and conditions, if they've read them, we need to have a checkbox. And with a radio button, once they click it, they can't unclick it. So if we only have the one, so this is where checkboxes are used, and checkboxes can be used for various purposes. So type checkbox and we'll give it a name. So checkbox, and then of course we need to assign a value to it, because if we don't assign a value, we're not actually going to get the information with this checkbox. So see here, we can uncheck and check it. So advantages of using a checkbox. There are a few other ones that we should still run through as well. So with HTML5, they presented us with a whole bunch new input types, and just gonna put them down here. So we have the option for a number, and it's the same format, type equals, and you guessed it, number type. So again, we have the ability to set a value there. We set a name for it, so my number or something like that, whatever we want to call it. And again, this is only relevant to how we're picking it up on the other end. We can set a minimum if we want. We can set a maximum if we want, and close that off. Do a line break, and we see that now with the numbers, we're presented with a number. We can move it up and down. We can't pass the minimum. If I try to type in some numbers, some letters, it's going to tell us. So when I do try to submit it, so I should actually remove that because we don't have that page existing, but you see when I put in some letters there, it allows me to put it in, but when I click it, we see that the HTML form is smart enough to know that this isn't a number. So it actually won't let me submit the form if I've set a type of number and if I haven't actually entered in numbers. So the forms are quite a bit smarter now with HTML5. There's a few other really neat ones available, different types. So I'll just show you those ones as well. So instead of number, we also have the ability to do date, and get rid of that minimum maximum, and this type is going to be a date. So I'm going to just call it my date. And this one's a really neat one because when you click on it, you see you can move things up and down. You also have the chevron here, and we can pick the current date. We've got these calendar options. And previously with HTML, we would have had to build this out in JavaScript, but we see with our option now in HTML5 that this is already presented to us. So really neat addition with HTML5. And another one of my favorite changes with HTML5 is color. So you see that this one, again, it has that built-in feature within our form, so there's no added JavaScript that I need to do. And I see I've got this color picker here, and what's happening in the behind the scenes is now whenever I pick a color and if I hit OK, it saves it as a color, and it's actually going to send over the hexadecimal value for this color in the string when we're posting it. So that's another really neat feature. There's another one here. So if we had a username and let's say we had an email, so what do you think that this one is going to do? And if you say that there's a type of email, you're correct, because it gives us the ability to set an email. And this is going to work in the same type of format as the numbers did. Whenever I type something in here, and if I click log in, or this is the submit button, it tells me that it doesn't see this as an email. So this is another really neat feature with HTML5 because it removes this issue of us having to try to figure out what with JavaScript, if this is an actual email that the users put in. There's a few other ones that might not be as common. We've got a type of search, so this is going to pre-format it in search and just do type search. So I think I could just leave out his name changes, and we can see that it formats it in a search type box. So we've got that X there where we can X that out. We also have another one, it's called TL for telephones. So TL telephone. So all it does is it's just going to look for a telephone type format. Oh, so we've actually submitted it. So there we can see what's actually been posted. So we see we've got the my call, we've got the hexadecimal number, and we see that what the content that was submitted. So let's just refresh that and reload our page. So I just had to get that content back that we were working on. So there's one other ones that I want to note, and that's for URL. So again, that input and type, and this type is going to be a URL, and this is going to work the same way as the number, as the email. It's not going to let you submit it unless you're actually submitting a type in the URL there. So if I type something in here that's not a URL, it's going to ask me to submit it as a URL. And then besides this, we've got a few other ones that are really neat where we can add in attributes. So we can add in an attribute of required. Let's see what this does. So I'm just going to save this so we don't lose that, and I'm going to remove that. So when I hit login, it's going to look for this as an attribute of required, and if it's not there, then it's not going to allow me to even submit the form. So another thing that HTML5 is taking care of that previously we would have had to do with JavaScript, and now that when we fill it out, then it'll actually allow us to submit that form. So we can really easily add in these required attributes and really build out our forms with a lot of built-in functionality. So besides all of these different types, there's also different formats as well for inputs. So sometimes you might require maybe a drop-down list. So this is also available in HTML. So this is just regular standard HTML. So here's where we specify the name. And this is just a drop down. And then the drop down items are going to be options. So we need to make our different options. So we've got our option, and always put a value within these options. So maybe this one can just be 1. And close off that option. And so this is what gets presented to the user. So we've got our options. This should be select. So I forgot that C. So that's what wasn't presenting properly. So here I can do option 2, I can do 3, and so on, and have the whole drop down there presenting all the different options. So we can see here we've got all of our options presented to us. If we want to have our option, let's say I want to start out with option selected, I can do that in as well. I can add in that selected. And also, let's say I want the user to be able to come in and place a whole bunch of text into an input field. So with our text input types, we're limited to a certain amount of characters, but when we use text area, this gives us the ability to really expand out on the available area. So text area. And with text area, we generally do specify what it's going to look like within these attributes. So if I had 5 rows and I had columns, so columns, maybe I want to do 20 columns or something like that. Close that off, and text area. That should actually be closed off there. So see that now we've got a text area. I can put in a bunch of text in here. I can expand it. So this is by default. I can have it start out with more rows. I can start out with more columns and really customize as needed. So maybe I'm going to bring this back down so I don't have too many rows. But we can get the point there that it presents a lot of content. Now let's say I want to have already some content presented in there. So this is my maybe not my new content, but existing content. So we see that this content that's placed within here, if we place anything between the tags, it gets presented within the form itself. One other thing that I want to add in, there's also the ability to do a namespace, so email. And when we save that, have it as a placeholder, so we would just change this to placeholder. So this shows us this kind of grayed out feature, and when the user starts typing, then we see that that placeholder goes away. And we can place these placeholders within any one of our input fields. So this, if we want to start out with maybe a number, a placeholder number here, enter a number. So though that's probably not the best field to do that in, but we can see that as soon as a number gets entered in there, that goes away. So these are a lot of different options with forms, and really with HTML you're presented with a lot of different ways to ask for content from the user and have that user really easily be able to add that content in. So this was an example of a bunch of different things that you can do within your HTML form.